In this video, we're going to create methods inside our class. And to do that, we're going back to our code. And if you look in the global scope, you still got some logic with actually belongs to the class itself and not to the global scope, so the rest of the file. That is this makeSound method. The global scope shouldn't determine which sound a certain animal makes, but the animal class itself should determine that. So we're going to replace this method by creating some extra methods inside our animal class. And let's start with implementing a property which is called string sound. And I'm going to actually make this private, and then you can see when it's nice to have a private property instead of a property which can be accessed outside the class itself. So here we have a private property, and I'm going to create a method which is called determine sound. And the input of this determine sound method is going to be a kind. And what we're going to do now is cut this code out and put it right back here. And if your code looks a little bit messed up, you can click on this format, and then you can see it fixes the format of the code. And what we're going to do now is, instead of printing it out, we're just going to set our sound property with the value that we're going to print out. So we're going to set the sound with woof, and also this mew mew we're going to set our sound with, but let's uppercase the M here and don't forget your semicolon. So to make the sound, we're going to implement another method which is going to be called makeSound. So void makeSound, and this doesn't need any inputs because we already have got our sound determined. So we just now can say print sound. The only thing left to do is, inside our constructor, we now call this determine sound method, and then we give in the kind. So now we've done that, we can delete this method, and we go up here, and now says makeSound animal.kind, but we can now say animal.makeSound, semicolon. And if we now run this, let's take a look at it. As you can see, we have still our woof, mew mew, but now also a null value, and that is because of Larry the bird, because the bird isn't registered, so it doesn't have a sound. And to fix that, we're going to create another structure here, and instead of if we're going to use else if. This is also better for the performance of the code, because in the old code it's now going to check if kind is dog. If that's true, it's still going to check if kind is cat, which we actually don't want, because when it's determined, we just want the code to exit this method. So if we use here else if, then it's going to check if the kind is dog. If that's the case, then it's just going to exit our method. And at the last, I'm going to say here else sound is unknown. So now what we have done is, if the kind is dog, then we set it to woof. If the kind is cat, we set it to mew mew. But if this kind can be determined, we're going to set it to unknown. So if we now run the code, then instead of null, we should see unknown. And something that we did on the property, we made this property private by using an underscore. We can also do that for the method, because this method is accessed outside our class, but this one isn't, and we don't want it to actually be called outside it. So we also place an underscore here. Now we get an error, and we're going to place it here as well. And now the only method that is new outside our class is this makeSound, but we actually implemented a lot more code than that. So what's really nice about this is that the logic of how the animal behaves is now inside our animal class, and is not determined by the code outside. So if we now would be at another file and we would call the same logic, then we are sure that this animal class behaves the same way in different contexts, and not in every file we have to determine which sound a dog makes or which sound a cat makes. No, the class itself determines the sound. And in this way, we can design really easy to read code, and it's really easy to comprehend what a certain code is doing. If everyone is going to implement their own implementation on your animal class, you get a really unstructured code and it's really hard to read. So keep that in mind when you're designing how your code should work.